Welcome to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times, sponsored by MSA Safety. In this series, we bring you sessions from the Emergency Services Show and the Emergency Tech Show 2025. Rounding off the 3 episodes from the Emergency Planning Society, the panel explores how the UK can strengthen resilience in the face of complex and evolving threats. They draw on real-world experience, emerging best practices, and recent government strategies to see how to enhance national capacity and capability.
Hi everybody, really pleased to be here. My name's Fiona Gaffney, Deputy Director in the Cabinet Office, and I have the joy of working with the team that design and deliver the UK Resilience Academy.
Hey, hello everybody, I'm Beverley Griffiths. I was the chair of the previous session. So I come from New Buckinghamshire University, but I have been an emergency manager and worked for the Cabinet Office in the past.
Alex Woodman, so I'm the Chief Fire Officer for Hertfordshire. I've got a couple of other hats on where I chair Hertfordshire's Local Resilience Forum, and I'm chairing our UK LRF Chairs Group, bringing the chairs together in a more operational capacity for all of our LRF chairs across the UK.
Brilliant. So we touched a little bit on this this morning, but I'm going to ask you each how resilient you believe the UK is at the moment.
So I actually think that's a bit of a trick question. Originally I was going to answer it with my heart and say, there's loads of places I know we're resilient. There's so many things that we're all doing brilliantly. And then I thought, oh God, I'm not feeling particularly resilient today, and went down the route of, are we talking personal resilience? And then I realised actually we can't answer that question because we haven't got a baseline measurement, not a really clear line that says this is what UK resilience looks like. The Resilience Action Plan has definitely set us in a direction where we're going to start to work together and do that. But I think until I have that in writing, I think I'm going to struggle to answer the question. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, so from my point of view, I think that the UK, and I have looked at, I know somebody mentioned earlier in one of the sessions, we've got other countries to look at as well. And I think actually UK can hold its head up high with what we do with resilience in this country. But there are many areas that I do believe that we can work on and learn from others, definitely in resilience. I do worry about perhaps some areas of hazards and threats, and also our population. But I think COVID did show that actually, people come out, we do quite well. And I think that came across earlier today. Yeah.
And I think probably what Fee was saying, it depends who you ask. If you work in this space, you're always going to be optimistic. You're never going to think there's enough doing. And I think if you are working in a resilient space, you're probably doing a pretty good job. We're probably doing the right things well. We've got good preparedness at different areas, different levels. I think there's more that we can do about coming together as a wider system, and we need to evolve in that space and make sure that the collective system of the UK is working better with each other. But I think the risk isn't if you're in the resilience world. It's for those, it's the culture of the UK. Are we resilient? Are we prepared? I think that's the area where we need to do more, because if you're in this space, you get it, you understand it, you know what needs to be done. Delivering that and getting others that don't necessarily operate in this space is the area where I think we need to do more about, a bit of a culture shift of preparedness.
So if you're kind of looking at, you talked about people involved in this space, but who really needs to be involved in building resilience?
Everyone.
Yeah.
And I know that's a bit of a quip answer, but if something goes bent and something goes wrong, you wish you'd been involved in it sooner. And it can affect any industry, any player, any sector at any time. It's not a blue light problem. It's not a government problem. It's not any industry. Everyone can be affected by something. So good preparedness should be in everyone's thought process.
Yeah. Sorry, go on. No, I completely agree. I think that there's definitely, over the past few years, a real move forward in people understanding their kind of personal roles in resilience. Some fantastic work that's going on really at the local level, at the community level, the voluntary sector, that's really engaging kind of the front line of resilience, the people that are in the communities. That's great. We can never wait for government to solve all of those problems. So it's a real kind of collective effort. And I've always just been really proud of the collaboration that does happen, seeing it in action, see it in preparation, see it in recovery. But I do think it's a conversation that has to continue. There's lots that people are doing now to talk more openly about risk that we never used to do before. And that's really helping it to become more of a palatable subject. So definitely a fan of kind of bringing my children up to think about risks and resilience. And I think that's the future. It's the sustainability of what we're doing now that I'd like to see kind of continued.
What were you going to say?
I don't think I've got anything more to add, really. I think everybody said it, so thank you.
So one of the things that was mentioned again, that's been talked about a couple of times today, was about different parts of communities and inclusivity. And so when you are saying it's everybody's issue, how do you engage people who might not be as interested, as involved, or might not access things in the normal kind of ways that we expect them to?
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
I think drop the perception and nonsense that it's an emergency service led thing, because I think all too often I'm sitting here dressed like this and I'm given more status than someone that's not. It's complete rubbish. I think if you're going to have real genuine resilience, we need to move away from this perceived hierarchy. And if you're talking about, community resilience, engagement in communities, our local authorities, our engagement with faith leaders, our trusts, our foundations, the voluntary sector are far more useful than I am. And I think we need to have this, if we still have a hierarchical approach, thinking that the emergency services are important, that is our biggest risk to having a really proper resilient community, that we need to drop this perceived hierarchy and understand what makes a system.
I think we need to understand where people are in our society. I know you spoke about it earlier about Girl Guides and different groups around the place that we usually go to, voluntary sector. But we said it earlier, there is still a massive amount of our population we're not getting to. So working with just employers, how resilient are their employees, and making sure that they can come to work the next day is still part of that connection with the community resilience. The elderly, how are we getting part of them? My mum's linked to a few organisations, but we don't necessarily linked to those when we think about that. So it's just thinking about where everybody is and different faiths. So when we did the big conversation, some areas have got perhaps big Polish communities that actually are quite insular in their own communities, and they've got their own radio station. When I worked in Hackney, we had one of the largest Orthodox Jews, and we had to work with the faith leaders to make sure we could even communicate with those type of people, So it's really understanding where everybody is and how we can connect, not just the usual suspects, shall I say, that are on some of the lists still.
I think I completely agree. But I suppose at government, we have a network of networks, really. We can't get everybody around the table all the time to have the conversation. So it's just really making sure we're making the best use of those excellent relationships that we do have, and that the word is kind of spread out from there. We were up at a societal resilience conference last year and listening to Duncan Shaw in Manchester talking about how 80% of the population's okay, can look after themselves, but what about that 20% that needs additional help, and where the consequences are worse for them? And we know this from various emergencies. And there's things government can do there in understanding where those vulnerabilities are and helping people at the local level to have access to the right data and mechanisms to share it, and really be able to target resources kind of more effectively. So I suppose I'm really here to say we're backing up the work that's happening at the community level and at the local level, and definitely enjoying having those ongoing conversations with the people that know the areas best.
Has anybody in the audience got questions? Because we'll try and throw in a few questions if there's anything. Yeah. Sound before.
And if you can just introduce yourself,
Yeah. Hi, I'm Harriet. I'm a recent member of the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry. This isn't more of a question, but I think what we need to do is just to raise awareness and positives of voluntary organisations wherever you are in the UK and also international where possible, and just more collaboration and durable steps to support everyone.
First aid nursing yeomanry, I always get that bit wrong, led, supported and coordinated the early response into Grenfell in supporting all the command and leadership team to get structured and do their work. So I think that level of understanding of what is out there is massive. And in turn, for you guys to promote as well, because we're rubbish, you're rubbish, we've got to get together better.
I can't remember who it was who said it. Said we need networks of networks because we don't have the capacity to engage with everyone. It's certainly something I've felt at a local level. There does seem to be a lot more willingness from communities to be prepared. So the question is, how can we empower communities to do this themselves? They don't need direction from emergency planning officers. What they need is to feel empowered to be able to do this. But having the ability to kind of engage with them to tell them that individually is incredibly hard. So is there something you can suggest that we could do that would make that easier at a much wider scale?
Can I go back to my original point? Drop the nonsense around an LRF executive, make it a proper round table. You're right, people don't need to be empowered. But if we create a structure that gives a perception that if your car goes Nino, you're more important than someone else, you're not going to have a true round table. And I think that's the point around, if you link that into testing and exercising, how do people learn? How do people develop? How do you shape plans? How do you shape preparedness? We don't engage properly with the voluntary sector, or we add it on as a nice to have, or we come up with some blah exercise about some big Nino bit that lets us test all our toys, but doesn't really talk about community resilience, doesn't think about humanitarian support and assistance. We don't truly test ourselves to make the system work. And I think if you can shift that, you start to see who's important locally.
Yeah, Jeannie mentioned it earlier today, before the Civil Contingencies Act, actually, she felt that perhaps there was more community cohesion in some of that. And actually, the structure that we represent is a barrier. And it's a saying that I've said for decades now, the cavalry is not coming. We don't have enough resources. And so we need to stop the empathy in the community to make them build their own resilience, understand that actually it's going to be a few days, hours before people can come to them. Somebody mentioned about New Zealand, but there was a presentation from Australia about a disaster they had. They were 3 days away before they could get to it. So although some of the other countries have got perhaps what we perceive as better community resilience, they've got geographical issues, but I think we forget that actually our resources won't be there for that length of time. Looking at the wildfires, I know some of the fire brigade struggled to do resource that over the period of time, and we've got to get that message right, definitely.
I think we're definitely moving forward in terms of enabling the whole of society to be more resilient. One of the key things we did when we designed the academy, the UK Resilience Academy, was to say training and education is really important. It's important for everyone. So how do we make sure we spread that as widely as possible? But the other thing we said was actually we need a space where we can actually convene representatives from the voluntary sector, community sector, faith sector, and talk about their inputs to our training and education and talk about how they think we should be shaping policy. So I think that's one of the things I am proud of, I can see lots of you actually here today who are part of that conversation with us, and it's been good to have that space at a time when I think lots of people were already doing things and government hadn't necessarily put a structure in place to support that. So I think it's definitely here now. We've got work to do, but we're all doing it together, so that's good.
I'm going to raise one question, which is finances. And there's on a double level kind of, because obviously organisations feeling under pressure, but then you've got trying to engage people who themselves may be struggling and under pressure financially. So how much of an impact does that have, and how can we kind of counteract it?
If you got it at the local level first, do you want to?
Do you want me to be honest again? Yeah. Oh, no, we've got loads of money, no problems. We're spent. No, let's be honest. I think the bit, everyone's skint. No one's got any money. Government's got no money. There's no point pretending that I could sit here crying to fee all afternoon, but there's nothing you can do about it. It's the real world. I think what we need to do is maximise the use of the money. And that's where we all want more. We could all spend it more. That's fine. We need to do that lobbying bit, and we need to have that structured discussion with ministers. But at the same vein, we need to have a better use of the public pound to get more from it. And that understanding of partnership, that understanding of roles, that it's no point saying the fire service wants another 50 million because we can do all of this. We still can't. If you gave me 50 million, we couldn't do this on our own. We need to understand the use of the money where it is, link people together better and be better at prevention and start working in that way. So God forbid, when we have to do it, we're better structured, better organised, and we're maximising the use of the resource.
Yeah, I agree. From the big conversation, that definitely the money financial situation was coming across, the resources, and it's not the fact that, I mean, Stephen's work, increasing in London, the numbers of emergency management, but the workload is increasing, the partnership work, and being expected to then communicate with your hundreds of thousands of community. You haven't got the resources to do that. But actually, is there ways of looking at emergency management? And I'll hold it out there. We've set something in the Civil Contingencies Act, but I see the frustrations of many of my students, many of my colleagues as a fellow of the Emergency Planning Society through the big conversation. People are sitting at their desks doing plans, doing risk assessments, but actually, would they be better having a cup of coffee with an organisation, a conversation with their community? Have we got something that's restricting us? So I'm being a bit out there at the moment because I've been a part of civil protection for decades, and I believe in it, but I do think that perhaps sometimes we're restricting ourselves, and there's smarter ways of doing the work with the money, and I think that's something we really need to progress for the future. It's not going to get easier. The emergencies are going to get worse, and we need to be ready for that, and we need to help them prepare themselves.
Absolutely.
I think from a government perspective, we're not immune to it either. The people who do resilience right at the heart of government are also undergoing restructures to be more efficient and look at how we're spending our money. When you see the outcomes of the spending review and you don't get the money that you've bid for, it can be really hard and disheartening. So then you have to get a bit inventive and look at, well, where did the money go and how can we tap into that kind of work stream to be able to get it? And there are areas, I think, through the Strategic Defence Review where there's opportunities for us to work together and find ways to get that money. And I suppose my plea would be, let's work together on the business cases for that and be really clear about what the effects are we want from it, and be able to sell the story in the best possible way and win loads of money.
Feel free, I was going to say, if anybody's got is there a question over there? Yeah?
Yeah, hi, Stephen Sheehan. I'm the North London NHS Foundation Trust. I suppose linking to the title of strategy and capacity, I suppose, how do you see things have changed in the last maybe 5 years with regards to cybercrime, that kind of much more digital aspect? Unless there is someone here, no one is a cyber expert. We work very closely with our IT team, but there's one guy in there who's cyber, and that's it. Take an example from last year. I was sitting at my desk, and they said there was a problem at airports in Australia, which nothing to do with me. And then it turns out it was the one that was related to Microsoft, which then took down our health roster system, which meant no one could see shifts, no one could book onto shifts. So it's really difficult now in this magic digital world we live in, how one system halfway across the world can have an impact on what we deliver. How do you see, from a capacity and a strategy point of view, looking forward, how can we be better digitally prepared for incidents that occur?
So you're definitely right in terms of that none of us, I believe, are cyber experts, but I think when we were preparing for today, there was a question about what worries you most, and personally, it's that for me. And it worries me because I don't understand it. It's an area that I'm not an expert in. I do know that certainly there's a lot of investment in the teams in the National Security Secretariat where we're based to kind of focus on these things. So to some extent, I think, okay, the people that do understand it are there and they're doing their work. I think the thing that really worries me the most at the moment of the whole picture of it is the bigger corporates seem to have the insurance in place and be able to cope with it. It's the supply chains that it's having an impact on those smaller businesses. So I'd be really kind of keen to see what can we do around organisational resilience and have a discussion about how we actually support those smaller enterprises to be more resilient to those kind of shocks. I don't have the answers on it, but I do share your worry.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, we do the masters on organisational resilience. So talking to my students who are there in industry, there's been a lot of increase of cyber resilience professionals in private sector, definitely, which is a worry actually. And it's not the fact that obviously cyber is a high threat, but it's the fact that it's drawing from the resilience of the organisation, and it's a focus rather than the wider issues. Universities are taking on board AI and all that. It's brilliant, but what happens when it goes? And we're forgetting sometimes, I think, some of those basics. So the resilience side of it for me is definitely something that we need to rebuild back on that.
I think this is a massive problem, and I don't think any of us know what we're talking about, because this is bigger than just one thing. And I think, as we've all said, that normally when we're talking about preparedness, we're talking about the effect, aren't we? Not the cause. But the cause here is massive, because if you tinker about with IT stuff, you can create havoc. And we often talk about it, something's gone down because there's a gremlin in the system. But what about when it's not a gremlin in the system and someone's tinkering with it on purpose? These are massive ramifications from these things. And I've got to be honest, I know you're not government really, but I'm looking at you as government today, Fee. The acting Prime Minister I'm going to speak to at the moment. But genuinely, I think this is something where there are a lot of people doing stuff in this space. I go to events like this and we talk about this as a theme, and I listen to some really clever people talk in this space, and you talk about supply chains, public sector reliance on private sector, and it just blows my mind every time I hear it. I do think this is something where we need to look to government and the greatest minds to come together to give us some direction and controls in this space, because we're all doing stuff and we're probably all doing our best, but our little collective efforts aren't maximising the power of it, and we need that government heft, I think, in this space to help us.
And just before I'm bring in another question, Beverley mentioned AI, so I'm gonna throw in is AI going to be part of the capacity and capability solution?
Well, from my point of view at universities, it's terrible at the moment. It does not give any answers correctly. So being an expert is much better than AI. I can certainly outdo AI at the moment. I think you have to look at, we're not cyber experts, but from what I gather about the power that it takes, the capacity we have in the technology. There are kind of worries about what AI will do, but actually you've got to have the infrastructure and support the infrastructure with the power for it to increase. So and I know the government are certainly looking at it, but I'm not sure it can be the panacea to all of our answers at the moment.
Well, I'm going to give you the same answer I gave to cyber. I don't know. I'm not going to make something up actually, but sorry, guys. I got nothing.
And you have to throw an AI question.
Yeah, no. I have seen that my team, that some of them are here, will know how I had no trust of it at all. But actually, I did see when you asked the right question of it, it really did come up with some good answers lately, Ben. I'm looking at you, so thank you for that. But I do think the human aspect is very much needs to be driving it at the moment, and all of the content that's in there has to be right before it can produce something wonderful.
I just recall a conversation some years ago with my father about how he thought email was going to be the death of the workplace, and he still finds it a horrific tool to communicate with other human beings. But I think the world moves on, and I think we've seen social media, whatever we think of it, it is here, and the genie is out the bottle. And again, I'm looking to those clever people who get this and understand it, because I think whatever we do with it, it's a thing, and it's bigger than any one of us, and it is here. And we need to look to the brightest and the best to help us with the safeguards and how we approach and use it.
Brilliant.
And it's not just about cheating on exams.
No.
Rosie.
doesn't work.
Amanda, I think you must be psychic because I was going to ask about AI, specifically social engineering, because I think that's one of the things that happen with Marks and Spencer's, because they use social engineering to target the supply chain, and that's obviously a very prevalent risk. So I think the only thing you can do is just develop mechanisms and to sort of be aware of what the capability is and move on with as the technology develops. That's all you can do, I guess.
I'm going to say there's a massive amount you can do with educating workforces about not letting their guard down with lots of things. We talked, I mean, you mentioned one of the questions I was going to ask you was around biggest areas of concern. I was accused of being a little bit negative this morning. So on the going back to where we started, where are our biggest strengths? What are the bits that we were talking again this morning about other countries, but what are the bits that we can export because we do it incredibly well?
This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the Emergency Services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
Well, I do think that, there are other countries who are constantly looking at us and telling us how fabulous we are, and it's true in lots of different ways. Certainly, from a UK government perspective, the way that crises are managed by the COBRA Directorate are pretty impressive. So that's always an area that's good. I think for us as a community, though, the thing that always impresses me most is just the passion to actually collaborate, share information, cooperate. I know it's all in the CCA and it's the stuff that, makes us the people we are, but there's a genuine, I think, passion and will for us all to work together, no matter our differences, to get the best outcome for the people in our wider communities. So that's always impressive. And I think the other thing is it's continuous improvement. I don't see us going backwards. I think I've been in this world for about 15 years and I see progression. The emergency alerts test 15 years ago, I never thought that would happen. So things like that are fantastic. UK Resilience Academy, Resilience Direct, some of those things that, are bread and butter are just really useful for everybody. So I'm proud of what we're doing. The AI thing caught me out, but I'm really happy about this.
Yeah, from my point of view, I think education as well. I think we've done so much. I think there's good people here that have really supported and given their time and effort for developing competencies, education programs, and we move on and we improve time and time again, and I think that's really important that we've progressed. Yeah.
And let's be honest, we are a pessimistic lot. It's the nature of the beast, isn't it, that we work in. We're paid to be miserable and unhappy and find problems. So, but I think there is a reality behind what was just said there. I think the other positive thing that we've got in this country, that when we have to step forward to respond, we're bloody brilliant at that as a system. And if you think across your networks and the way that we have a culture of stepping forward, stepping in, I can't think of any scenario that I've ever been in where I've asked anyone for anything and they've said no. And all the normal barriers of, we don't like government, we don't like this, we want local, all of that stuff just goes away overnight. And I think that's where we have to be really positive, that as a system, we are very good at supporting each other in times of need. And that's something I think that we can really sort of be positive about.
So is there, looking at other countries, is there something that happens in other places you went, that we really need to get that here, and it'd be really good if we could get that here? Is there anything that you've come across that you would look to?
So the weird thing is it's kind of been the other way around lately. It's been people, and we know about the Scandinavians have got kind of, really good approach, but they've also got a really different culture in terms of the societal resilience. But they're coming to us, asking us questions in as much as we are to them. Same with Australia, New Zealand and Canada. There's some kind of really good practice sharing going on, I think. I always look for an excuse to go to the Republic of Ireland, so I think anything that needs me to go there and show how good they are, I'm up for that. But I think it's a really good two-way street at the moment, so nothing.
From me, having looked at other countries over the past, I think we can learn a lot from New Zealand. And New Zealand have linked many years ago with universities and research, and that has really informed their work. They've also employed a lot of practitioners in senior level roles who have actually got the experience and the ability to communicate to perhaps government level. And I think there's been a lot of other countries that perhaps we could learn from in that respect, where they put practitioners who are experienced in some of those senior roles who can really advise, that kind of perhaps miss some of that politicalness out. And I think that some of our structures perhaps sometimes restrict some of that knowledge from getting there in the past. And I think we're getting there now, and there are some changes ahead of that. But people will know who I'm talking about, which is Norm, who worked in COVID. She was one of ours here in the UK, got straight into the Prime Minister, advising straight away, and they built around that knowledge, and I think that was really important. And it showed in their response. It did.
And I think some of the areas, if you look at the governance of the countries, is really interesting. And I was saying governance, not governments. And anyone heard of LGR and Devo? Sorry. But I think we've got a real opportunity that if you look at those countries where they have some really clear, strong governance, where there's not 500 different layers and 300 people in charge, there's some really clever and interesting things happening. And I must say, one of the things that I'm looking at very closely with what is happening with LGR and potential devolution, I think there's some real good opportunities there for resilience, accountability. So I think that some of the things, you see some of those countries, we saw what happened in Rio, pre-Olympics and other areas. Yeah. If you have someone in charge who's accountable and you have a pretty good pyramid, they're pretty good at getting stuff right and working with each other. Who knew? But that's, I think, it's an interesting point.
That's fair.
So, Jeannie mentioned this morning a key in resilience being trust. So from your perspective, how, in terms of moving forward, how important is people trusting that what you're saying and how this might develop and what you're asking them to do?
I think that things like trust, relationships, I link back to some of the things that I've said, is it trust? Is it removing hierarchies? I'd love to see language like category 1 and category 2 responders go away, because I don't think that's a helpful exercise. And I think if you're going to build trust and you're going to build relationships, it's back to my point around truly understanding who is important in running a system. They might not be important every Thursday, but when you need them, you need to have that relationship. And I think that's what builds trust. And to have a really trusting, resilient community, you need to test, you need to exercise, and you need to build those relationships, because we've done that in the blue light services. JESIP does that for us, and we're pretty good at that, but we forget about everyone else, to be honest with you. And that's how I think how you really build a trust and resilient system.
I was going to say, I have a massive issue with category 1 and 2 responders being a group, and things like housing that don't. I've done some work with housing, and housing now, because it isn't necessarily under local authorities, doesn't feature.
Yeah. I think the relationship that was said there, and I was speaking to some of my colleagues earlier about how we work together and how we build that relationship. I remember when I was emergency manager in Hackney, and probably why I put on all my weight, we used to go with the police, fire and ambulance for lunch. We used to have, and we used to connect. We used to build relationships. We used to connect, and when we responded, we knew who we were. We knew each other. We could rely on each other. It didn't matter what organisation we were from, what hierarchy was going to push us. We knew what we were going to respond to for our community and what was right. And having sometimes those big, broad shoulders to stand up to some of those policy decisions can be really hard. I mean, I had one of the longest sieges in the UK, and it was during Christmas and New Year, and there was politicians going, we can't get people their Christmas dinner, or we can't get them the alcohol. What a load of tosh. Sorry, my language might swap now to an emergency manager's language, and you're all going to laugh at me now. You know, you've got to stand up for your people, and you've got to stand up going, you know, this plan is out of the window. My community needs me, and that's how it's action. And we have to stand up for our people and our communities. We're representing them, and sometimes we have to break our rules and our barriers to do that. And I think we've got to have these long conversations. It came out in the big conversation, Jeannie, didn't it? You know, the people who get things done are the people who actually break their own barriers and break their own frameworks. Yeah,
Definitely.
Trust is such a deeply hitting word, I think, when you work in government, because there's perceptions about, you know, being in central government or the political element and things like that. So I think for me, it's just, I have to earn your trust and just have to be honest. I think that's the only way that I approach things. If I don't have the answer to something, I'll say it, but I generally know who to ask. And I can see a lot of my colleagues do that as well, and that's really heartening for me, kind of where we work. So particularly kind of going forward, seeing the number of people that are involved in designing policies and making decisions who don't understand the local level, but are now saying, oh, actually, let's talk to the people and see what's needed, see what the requirements are. And it's really good. That feels like something that's heading in the right direction. But I'll leave it to all of you to decide whether or not you trust me.
Great. I was going to say, yeah, good question.
Alec Western, OBIS. With all the systems that you use and hearing from other speakers about communication systems that are coming online that are being integrated and the growth going forward on that and the interaction of other systems, for the systems that you use, if there was a war, an attack, whatever, and you lose those systems, what do you hold in reserve as a backup? Because these systems are absolutely wonderful. I totally agree. But what happens if they fail? Okay, what backup systems do you have?
Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go first, Jen.
Do you know what there are a mixture of things, you know, as you'd expect across all of our preparedness. There are some things that are secure systems, some things that are less secure systems. I think what we prepare for and what we look for is the ability to work back into more analog functions and processes. You heard the word volunteers and others. When everything's up and running, it's pretty good. When the Wi-Fi I know what happens with my kids when the Wi-Fi goes down at home. Imagine if that's scaled up. You've got to be realistic about the fact that you cannot be assured that our digital infrastructure is going to be functioning. One of the things I think around what makes me nervous in our preparedness is that we have too much optimism bias. And I think we need to be a little bit more pushing on the boundaries of the what ifs, because we are so heavily reliant on our digital infrastructure. And I don't think we're all as confident as we could be in its ability to function. But we do have backups, government have there are systems in place. Some of them are tried and tested. Some of them might be a bit historic. But again, I think we probably need to get into a space of testing. I'd like to see our exercising pushing things a bit more to the extreme and not sitting in the comfortable middle. And some of that, I think, speaks to your question.
Well, I don't have systems that I use as a university now, but the plans that we talk about are people. You know, if your system's gone, it's your people and your network. So when you're talking to, I don't know, the flood wardens and things like that, who you would communicate with via emails and mobiles, have that conversation of what ifs, and that's what we run through definitely in our courses, is that what if. And so can you say to them, where are they going to meet if the communications goes down? Where are they going to get their information from? You know, are they going to go to the local police station, local government? You know, where is that information that then they can pass out and knock on doors? And that when the communications technology goes, that's our backup, isn't it? So, but we've got to have those. I don't think that exercise is being pushed, and I don't think that conversation is being had with our networks. And they're really basic conversations we should be having, not just are you going to be a flood warden and this is your role? What happens if you're going to be part of my network in this situation? And we need to have those bigger conversations.
I think for me, my first love was a business continuity plan, and that's just never going to change. I'd say if you've got a business plan, you need a business continuity plan, and you need to exercise it. So certainly in government, there's lots of different arrangements for kind of contingency plans for delivering the most important functions that government has. They do exercise it regularly too. So I feel that probably that's an area of strength that we've got in the COBRA Directorate. But yes, if you don't have a business continuity plan, I'd suggest that everybody goes and gets researching and writing.
Because I mean, it was exercised recently, wasn't it? With Mighty Oak was
the
looking at
NPO,
that.
Yeah, was anybody involved in Mighty Oak? Yeah, still bearing the scars. Yeah.
Could I just ask a question on that? Does everyone know what that is?
No.
And I think therein lies a problem.
Yeah.
That we're doing stuff, but I don't think we're communicating effectively to people on what's being done.
So that was a really interesting one, and because it was a different government, but at the time there was some real nervousness about.
Classic civil servant. Sorry, excuse me.
I'm getting good at this now. I've been a civil servant for 6 years now. It's starting to hit. But there was a real kind of lack of willingness to talk about the fact that we were exercising against a national power outage scenario. It felt a bit too risky and scary, and maybe that the public wouldn't be able to cope with it. But I don't think we're there anymore. Certainly where we're talking about the major exercises that are happening now, I think there's much more appetite for ministers to say, we're doing this and it's important and lots of people are involved. So some of you may have colleagues who are in the middle of exercise Pegasus at the moment, the pandemic exercise. So hopefully that's a name that maybe everyone's kind of heard of.
Brilliant. Is there any final sort of questions? Then I've got a quick round-up question I want to ask at the end.
Hi, I'm a EPRR manager in health. I just wonder about capacity for resilience currently. It feels like we've been redlining our resilience measures for the past 5, even longer years. So how do we continue to build that resilience with trying to get that senior leadership to buy in when all they can see is, well, we're constantly in resilience measures and everything seems to sort of been ticking over the same. I'm really concerned as soon as something big happens again, I don't think we have that capacity to manage that. And I don't think it's going to take very much to take that capacity away. So it's just, how do we continue to build resilience in that capacity?
Anybody?
Do you want me to go? Oh, sorry. No, you go first.
So from my point of view, I think, I'm going back to kind of business continuity actually, I think people see resilience, we talked about job titles earlier, as the panacea to solving the problems. Hence, perhaps some of them get other jobs put on them because they can deal with problems. But actually, it's not. It's the organisation. It's everybody in the organisation. And you know, I know from the big conversation again, those conversations coming out, those issues coming out about different departments and within the organisation going, it's not our responsibility, that's what you do. No, actually, this is a whole organisation. This is everybody's responsibility to be resilient yourself, to do your job, but also to be resilient to then support the response of that organisation. And I think that message, to me, is the biggest thing that we've got to get across here, is to our public and our employees, that everybody is responsible, they have a role to play. Their day job doesn't go on because, you know, somebody else is doing that. And that there is a real, I think business continuity actually was a bit of a barrier as well to that. You know, people going, oh, somebody's going to control business continuity. No, that's everybody's responsibility. And it's great having all our tick boxes, isn't it, in business continuity. Oh, I've done my bit. No, your bit is to actually respond and ask what you can do. I sound like I'm going back a little bit, I think, in history. Ask what you can do. Yes, absolutely.
I would like, so a direct answer to your question, I want to see LRF chairs, not LRFs themselves. I want to see the chair of the LRFs do more. And I speak as one, and I've spoken to all of us, and as I mentioned, I chair the group now. I think as a collective body and a collective strength of individuals, we need to do more to support LRF managers and LRF's collective around what we are doing, what our approach is, making sure that preparedness is being discussed at the right level of organisations, and make sure that as the chairs, we are engaging in our local areas in a really strong and direct manner with all of those that sit around the table to hopefully make sure that that part of the agenda gets higher up on board meetings, gets higher up on levels of discussion, because I think all too often we see pockets of people that are struggling to get traction with certain decision makers. And I think it's incumbent on the chairs in those areas to use their leverage to make sure that we're having the right level of discussion.
And I think, so thinking about the lessons that came out of Grenfell, for example, really highlighted the training and education needs of senior managers, you know, the executive level, the real gap in leadership, and also the link to standards with that as well. So I think where we need to get to, and it comes back to that missing baseline measure of what good looks like for resilience, is just having a really clear standard for senior leaders. That means that they have to, you know, prove that they have had their training in resilience, that they've taken part in exercises, that they understand who their LRF kind of, you know, compadres are. And I think we need to be just heading in that direction, where to be an executive of an organisation, you should know how to manage a crisis and how to support your people through it. So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's a bit of a follow-on question, and I absolutely agree with that approach of kind of top-down, putting additional pressure on local authority and partner leadership to say you've got to take this seriously. But considering their time they spend on regional work is probably minimal, is there something that we can be doing to support local resilience planners at a very kind of operational level to have those conversations with their senior managers that allow them to cut through the noise that is currently going on, especially in local government, around funding cuts, housing crisis, social care collapsing in some places? Like, there's a lot of noise going on in local government, and we have an important message that we need our senior leaders to listen to, but it's increasingly hard to cut through that noise. Is there something that we can do to help local practitioners do that?
I think this is back to my point of where I'd like to see LRF chairs, who should be that visible link point in the areas, stepping up more and stepping into spaces that, whether it's we've been polite, whatever the reasons being, we need to be in a different operating space. And I think we need to be making those links. And again, I think is that point around, if you're struggling in an area to get traction because of your ability to be prepared, are your leaders in that area even being represented around your LRF executive? If they're not, they probably should be. And there's a gap in the LRF executive about making sure they've got proper engagement. So to me, our link points coming out, you've got 38 of us sitting around. The 38 of us should be accountable for making sure that we've got resilient boundaries. And if we're not, call that individual out and find out why not and make the links.
I think what you're talking about is cultural transformation, and that's really hard. We've probably all been that emergency planning officer that's seen things happening at the top and not had the wherewithal to call it out. So that's like, is there even a safety challenge space in that organisation to kind of do that? So I think if we kind of like continue collectively to move towards that place where the whole of society is becoming more resilient, then those conversations are happening everywhere and they become a bit easier to happen in the workplace. But I think you'll always need somebody at that senior level, be it ministerial or peers, to be able to influence the senior level. I think there's a real thing about having good examples of senior leaders sharing their own experience and practices with other senior leaders, or having mentoring and things like that at a leadership level, which, you know, I just think there's a softer approach that's needed alongside the kind of standards and accreditation type route as well.
Yeah. I think to add to that, and it's been recognised by the UKRA, I believe that actually having the behaviours and the skills to have those conversations is something that's being looked at. Is now something that's been recognised. You know, the only job that I've had is in a local authority has been brilliant, because the chief exec thought I was his best friend, and I could have that honest conversation with him that I was there for the community. I wasn't there for him, but I was there for him, and we could have that honest conversation of, you know, the restrictions of what was going on within the organisation, the barriers to that, and we had a good conversation. But I have known others that can't have that conversation, and we need to build that skill level up, and that mentoring, and the LRF role has certainly got that to stand up and be heard.
It's more of a comment on that last point, and I think that what you've just discussed is really important, because you're talking about tacit knowledge, not kind of taught knowledge, and all the experience that you're talking about in resilience. That's where that mentorship becomes really, really important, especially at the LRF level, looking to your peers to learn that knowledge so that, again, that collective memory is retained.
And I'm going to have one last question, which is, we sit and we've listened to you, which is great, but what would you want everybody to take? What's the one thing you would want people to take away from today?
I think my point, whatever role you are playing, in whatever capacity you are in, don't be polite and call stuff out. You know, we need, you know, that's, if there is a problem, it's your job. Call it out, don't allow it, because we've all seen when it's gone wrong. Go and talk to Grenfell United and explain to them why you didn't call it out. You know, that's the type of question you've got to ask yourself. So if you have frustrations with your leadership, call it out, because we've got a bigger role to play than just being put 7th on a list of resilience and preparedness.
Yeah, I was going to say, stand up and be counted, make your voice heard. I mean, we're trying to collect voices now, which is really important. But I think also, you know, stand up and don't be afraid to break those barriers. You know, sitting in an office writing an emergency plan is not going to make your community resilient. So I think we need to stand up and say, where do we spend our pounds and our effort, and where is that best had? And I often say to my students, the first thing I say to my apprenticeship students is, go and have a cup of coffee with every meeting in the organisation. Forget writing the plan. Go and find out who's in your organisation, and go and have a conversation about what would they do if, because you'll learn far more than writing a plan that nobody's going to read. So stand up, be heard, and I think we need to challenge things more.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I was going to say what I'd written in my book, but I'm going to go with my heart now. I think just to be part of our network of networks. You know what we need to know and what we need to tell ministers for the right decisions to be made. So stand up, use your voice, but share your knowledge, and thank you all very much.
Thanks for listening. Remember that by taking time to learn from our speakers, you can earn CPD points from our partner CPDme. So do check out the link in the show notes. Our thanks to MSA Safety for their continued support for our podcast, and to Smart Digital for producing this series. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.